Okay, got the thumbs up. I'll call our committee of the whole meeting to order. Is there any declaration regarding any item on today's agenda? Councillor Gray.
Through you, Warden, I wish to express declare an interest in the deputation item 4 as well as the correspondence 6A due to I do have decision-making authority through business participation in the loan program.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We have, is there any business arising from the minutes? I don't believe there is any. No. So this morning we have a delegation. I welcome Ryan Mallow. Is that how you, there we go. All right, very good. He's from the Canadian Federation of Independence, Independent Business. He's going to be speaking on the Canada Emergency Business Account repayment deadline. So welcome, Ryan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here to talk about this. I'm Ryan Mallow. I am the VP of Legislative Affairs for Ontario with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Just a little bit about us and some background. We're in our 52nd year here at CFIB. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with offices here in Ontario, one in Ottawa, and then we are present in every province around the country. We advocate on behalf of small business owners. Our membership is made up of Canadian-owned and independently operated businesses. So nothing that's foreign-owned, nothing that you would see on the stock exchange. Really the businesses that make up the main streets in your communities, your dry cleaners, your small retailers, your cafes, your restaurants. That is the bulk of our membership. We've got 97,000 members cross-country, 38,000 here in Ontario. And importantly, because I'm going to be sharing a fair bit of data from our membership across this presentation, we are one member, one vote. So we survey our members very regularly. During the pandemic, it became extremely regularly. We were surveying on Fridays, crunching data on the weekends, and presenting that data to government officials at both the provincial and federal levels on Monday morning. We were as close as you could get to being able to provide feedback in real time in terms of what programs were working, what impact they were having, what was very much not working, the impact that closures were having to government officials to help them make sure that they were including small businesses in the decision-making process. So as much as I want to focus on the present, it's a little hard to talk about where we are without talking about where we've been. It comes as no surprise to any of you. I expect that the last few years have been incredibly difficult for small businesses, particularly those here in Ontario. We've been through some of the longest closures. We had, I think I topped out at 28 or 29 different names for them from the provincial government, from color zones to numbers to everything else in between stages 1 through 3. And that's had a significant impact on business. In fact, still today in 2023, 60% of our membership continues to carry pandemic-related debt. And importantly, 47% are still below normal sales. And that's not catching up. We don't expect a lot of businesses will ever be able to catch up on the years that they lost. But the business has not returned the way that it was pre-pandemic. A lot of spending habits have changed. A lot of things like, gym memberships just aren't coming back the way that they were. And that is continuing to have an impact as well. We were hopeful, as I think most people were, at the beginning of 2022, when we came out of our final lockdown in January here in Ontario, that things would get better. I don't think anybody had Russia invades Ukraine on their bingo card. That's had a significant impact. Serious supply chain issues from overseas as well as internally, not to mention recent port strikes and that sort of thing, have certainly exacerbated issues and really stalled recovery. Really prevented businesses from being able to really get heavily on that road. So when I talk about the 60% of businesses that have pandemic-related debt, we would characterize about 40% of that to be in heavy debt. And those are businesses that say, we are unsure we'll be able to repay this, or this debt is business threatening, and we are having to consider closure on that side. A lot of that debt is tied to the CEBA loan. So for those of you that are unaware or may not remember, because it has been a while, the CEBA loan was a federal government program that was launched fairly early in conjunction with the banks across the country that initially allowed businesses access to up to a $40,000 loan with the idea that if it is repaid before the deadline, $10,000 of that loan would be forgivable. The government later extended the program to offer an additional $20,000 and another $10,000 forgivable portion, totaling at a maximum of $60,000, $20,000 forgivable if it is paid by the deadline. The deadline was originally December 31st, 2022. It is now December 31st, 2023. That is coming up extremely quickly. This loan was exceptionally popular, both amongst our membership and businesses across the country. 900,000 businesses took out this loan across Canada. That's roughly 9 in 10 small businesses across the country. Most of them took out the full amount. About 68% of business owners took out between 40 and 60,000. Only about a quarter took about sub 40,000. So we are talking about relatively large numbers here. Because recovery has stalled, because there's a number of challenges that continue to be out there, because we were closed for a lot longer than we thought we would be, 8 in 10 businesses that have the loan have yet to repay it, have yet to begun to repay it. Only 10% of businesses have paid it off in full at this point. We do know that among those businesses, there are some that are just waiting for a little bit closer to the deadline for cash flow purposes. They will be okay. They'll be able to repay it. But there are still a staggering 40% of businesses that don't think they'll be able to repay it at all. If they are unable to repay it by the December 31st deadline, that forgivable portion disappears on them and the loan turns into, I believe it's a 5-year term loan at 5%. And again, our members are telling us significantly that that is going to create massive problems for their business, to the point where they may be forced to shut down. I will note that the smallest businesses are the ones that are most likely to miss the deadline. Those are the ones that have between 0 to 4 employees. But it is still significant amongst those larger businesses too. They're still having a lot of trouble on the repayment side. When it comes to sectoral breakdown, we hear about the hardest hit sectors a lot. Should we do something for them? I want to underscore here that yes, there are sectors that have been hit harder, and those sectors are more worried than the general numbers about whether or not they'll be able to meet the deadline. Those sectors largely fall in arts and recreation and hospitality. Hospitality, restaurants, I think that's unsurprising. I will note in Ontario, restaurants lost over 400 days for indoor dining to the various closures over 3-4 different lockdowns. But I want to underscore, while restaurants do get a lot of the attention, and rightfully so, there are a lot of other businesses that were shut down for just as long, if not longer. Really want to underscore gyms and fitness businesses. Gyms and fitness businesses also lost over 400 days. They are also very much struggling. Our fitness members tell us that even membership has only bounced back to about 80% of what it was pre-pandemic and seems to have topped out there. So they face a lot of difficult decisions coming forward. The other one to underscore, events. Event spaces in Ontario lost 628 days in total over the pandemic to being allowed to offer full capacity. They are another sector that gets a little bit overlooked, but very much needs support on the loan side. What happens if we don't get the support or don't get the deadline extension? Well, based on our numbers and feedback from our membership, we believe that approximately 250,000 businesses in Canada are at risk of closure. That's 20% of the small businesses. That is a staggeringly high number. Believe me, I balked when our research team brought it to me. That could not possibly be real. It checks out. In Ontario, that would mean 96,000 businesses across the province considering closure if they are unable to get a loan extension. And again, the timeline for that is very quickly running out. I want to underscore as well, when we are talking about an extension, we also want to ensure that that forgivable portion remains intact for businesses to meet the future deadline. If that forgivable portion is lost, 78% of businesses are questioning whether or not they can survive. So that is an important part of the program and the extension. So in terms of what CFIB is doing, what we are looking for the federal government to do, and part of what I'm looking to ask you guys for support on today, is to generate the urgency to get this loan extended. We launched a petition during the pandemic around COVID recovery support. We sent that petition on May 17th, I believe, to federal government officials. At the time, it had around 18,000 signatures. Since then, we have generated another 14,000 signatures just in the 2 months since we last sent it. We are hearing this as we visit businesses door to door. That is how we operate. We visit about 2,000 businesses across the country every week. This is what we are hearing on the ground. We are hearing a lot of concern, a lot of consternation about whether or not CEBA will be extended, what it will mean if it doesn't get extended, whether or not these businesses will be able to stay open. We are hearing it from the businesses that took out the loan. We are hearing it from businesses that didn't take out the loan or have already repaid the loan. A lot of business owners understand that their ecosystem is at risk. And even if they survive, if we see a mass shutdown amongst their suppliers or their clientele, that is going to have a major impact on them as well. Underscoring the importance for them for getting it extended. So we have delivered that first batch of around 18,000 to the federal government. We will deliver that second batch with whatever our number looks like come September, but we know that it is going to be significant. We have also, along with the Canadian Tourism Industry Association, the Restaurants Canada, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, rallied the business community around this issue. This is rare. Business community tends to like to operate a little bit independently. It's not often that associations get together calling for something in a collective voice. We were able to rally over 250 business associations, that is chambers of commerce, BIAs, boards of trade, industry associations, the provincial branches of things like Restaurant Canada, the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, across the country, to call on Minister Freeland to get a loan extension. I have yet to come across an association that has any small business amongst its membership that is not on side with asking for this extension, that does not understand the implications of what will happen if we do not get this extension put through. So that comes to near the end of my presentation, but the ask on your part, we're not looking for the municipalities or anything to step in to provide financial support, nothing like that, simply to raise the alarm, to talk to your MPs when you do have those conversations, to talk to your associations, to AMO, to Roma, to say that this matters for you guys too. This is local jobs, this is local tax revenue on the property side. This has an impact on local economies, but this is also the souls of our communities. Our local businesses are the names on the backs of our kids' hockey sweaters. They are the sponsors on local charity events. And I heard a number of events going on in the city council portion of the council portion of this a little bit earlier. I guarantee you that you're going to see local businesses' names on banners and stalls during those events. That is what is at risk here. It is the signs that are lit up after a long day to let us know that we're almost home. They did what they were told to do during the pandemic. They shut down for the good of the public. They did it to an extent, at least initially, without complaint. And all we are asking for is a little bit more time. We're not asking for $27 billion in subsidies to build cars. We are not asking for total loan forgiveness at this point, not that we wouldn't take it. We are asking for a little bit more time to pay off the loan in recognition of how long we were shut down and how difficult it has been coming out. So anything that anyone here can do to just relay that message on to decision makers. If it's a government MP, wonderful. If it's an opposition MP, that is wonderful too. We've seen great support take up from the NDP federally. We've seen the Bloc Québécois federally call for it as well. We just want to make sure that this is very much front and center on the agenda federally, because it is our communities that are fundamentally at risk if we don't move forward. That's my time. I appreciate you all for listening. If you have any questions, I'm super happy to answer anything you have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Milo. Are there any questions? I understand that there is a petition that has been started by you folks. One thing that I, understand is that you'd like us to sign that petition. Is that correct?
The petition is geared at business owners. So
okay.
sharing the petition on social media, something like that is wonderful. For the municipality signing, I mean, I think it's physically possible to go in and sign on. It's not like it generally speaking, we're using that to rally business owners around the cause. And again, when we take those petitions to the federal government, we break them out by MP so we can say these are the businesses that are in your community that are being affected. So I would say sharing more than signing would be the ask. But again, if not the petition itself, just the spirit of what's in there as you're talking with federal officials would be wonderfully helpful.
Certainly, certainly. And I would suggest one thing we could do in that respect then is to send a letter to our MP, Alex Ruff, indicating support for what the CFIA is, or the CFIB, sorry, I farm, so that other one is on my mind. So the independent business community, what they're looking for is support they're asked. Is that Councillor Matrosovs?
Thank you, Warden. And to add on to what you've just said, could we also please include the members of Parliament that represent Simcoe Grey as well? Thank you.
Absolutely. Our clerk has a motion here that we could consider if that's agreeable. Right. So the notion is to the Minister of Finance and AMO as well. I think we want to include members of Parliament representing Simcoe Grey and Bruce Grey Owen Sound as well. Okay. Councillor Eccles. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Is this association's call on the provincial government or the federal government?
Federal.
The motion there reads on the provincial government to extend. I think it should be federal, Sarah. And then the next one would be the MPP, Ruff. Just one P on him.
Okay. Councillor Matrosovs.
Thank you. Through you, the Warden, just for clarity, then we should also be identifying MP Dowdle as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. You're moving that motion? Seconder, Councillor Eccles. Further discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. McDowell.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Mallow. Thank you very much, Mr. Mallow.
Anytime.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I need to read the agenda before I just throw a name out like that. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items there requiring separate discussion? Not seeing any. Would someone care to move adoption of Councillor McKay? Seconded by Councillor Hutchison. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. And Councillor Greg is going to rejoin us. Matters for discussion. Start with item number 7A. We have a report here from Savannah, who is going to speak to the Intelligent Community Smart 21 of 23. So welcome, Savannah. Oh, everybody got a lovely parcel of information to take back to their local municipalities. So anyway, Savannah, welcome. I let you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Warden, and good morning, County Council. It's always a little bit more fun to put it in a nice looking booklet than just a council report. So that's why we wanted to create something that you could take home to your member municipalities as well and share with all of your councilors. So you have envelopes on each of your desks there to be able to bring back, and there's enough for all of your councilors locally as well as your CAO. So that's what your extra mail is for today. So I'm really happy to talk about the Intelligent Community Forum, and we wanted to take this moment to celebrate what Grey County and the region collectively accomplished in 2023. So on February 23rd, Grey County was named to the Smart 21 Communities of 2023 by the Intelligent Communities Forum. The recognition of a Smart 21 community highlights that we are dedicated as a region to progress and innovation. It takes vision and action at all levels, from residents and businesses to institutions and governments, to be intelligent. It doesn't happen by one individual or one body. It takes everybody together. So what is an intelligent community, and who is the Intelligent Community Forum? We fell in love with the Intelligent Community Forum and the vision that they represented because they were a global network of think tank at its center. So it's connecting hundreds of cities and regions on 5 continents around the world for collaboration on economic development, exchange of expertise and information to drive progress. We always like to use the term R&D to rob and duplicate, but then to turn it into a made in Grey solution. And this is an awesome think tank for us to be able to dive into and explore and learn from others who have been through similar things to us, and then see what we can bring back to make it something that will work for us. So there's a little image here talking about the 6 different facets of what makes up an intelligent community. And what is so important about this is that it takes all 6 happening simultaneously. So again, it is never just one thing. I've got a little quote here that's in the report, but I do want to read it out because I think that it really does mean a lot. So the ICF, they say, we do it for communities large and small, in urban clusters and outlying suburbs and rural places through training, consultant, assessment, certification, and award programs. ICF believes that digitally connected and technology create the opportunity for almost every community to develop a dynamic local economy and a social and cultural strengths that go with it, giving them a chance to be a great place to live, work, learn, grow, raise a family, and prepare a path for the next generation. So at the heart of intelligent communities are people, and I think that's why it matters so much to us here in Grey. It is a movement, and it means that nobody is left behind. So the Intelligent Community Accelerator Strategy, that's what you see on the screen here and on page 2 of your book, talks about this strategy and those 6 factors, looking at broadband connectivity, looking at knowledge work, innovation, not necessarily through technology, but in the partnerships and the people that we bring to the table to do things differently. Sustainability, digital inclusion, again, meaning that nobody is left behind, and community engagement. And it takes all 6 of these people to realize economic growth and social and cultural growth, because this is what creates the community and the lived experience of our everyday life. Whoop. I am no good with this. There we go. So we created a little roadmap, and within this document, you'll see some details about the projects that we highlighted in the 2023 applications for both the Smart 21 and the top 7 intelligent communities. So there's some level of detail to be able to provide you with some of the statistics, but we also created a little roadmap because we thought that was important, and this spans a decade. So this talks about the seeds that were planted 10 years ago that have been being nurtured by our community, being nurtured by our partners to get us to where we are today. What is also noted among here is that this is a collective effort. So there is not one initiative in this booklet or in our application that was done by one individual or in a silo. Every single thing happened collectively with partners at the table. And I think that's what makes Grey County so truly inspiring, is that that is what we want to do. We want to work together. We want to bring all of the knowledge and all of the expertise to the table to make things happen so that we are doing the best we possibly can for our communities. And that is highlighted throughout here. This and so much more has influenced the strong and vibrant community that Grey County is today. This is a place that people want to live, where they want to experience their everyday life, where businesses want to come, they want to grow. And this is really important. And it is a moment to celebrate, realizing that collectively we have created an amazing community that people want to be, and that we can support that life that we're all looking for. So every one of these programs and initiatives, including being done in partnership, is also improving the life of residents and businesses. So it's considering the whole life through every stage and every age, yesterday, today, and well into our future. So together, we are shaping a brighter and more prosperous future, setting benchmarks in an intelligent community that values progress, sustainability, and community pride. And I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate each of you here and your staff and your communities, because you are the reason that we're here. So thank you so much, and congratulations on being an intelligent community of 2023.
Thank you, Savannah. I'm always excited to listen to Savannah. She's always so positive. I love it. Are there any questions for Savannah or any comments? I neglected to get a mover and seconder to receive the report for information, Councillor Carlton and Councillor Pringle. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, Savannah. Next report is an updated Grey County Housing Action Plan. Liz Buckton is going to speak to that, I believe. Here she is. Welcome, Liz. Would someone care to move this report? Councillor Mackey and Councillor Patterson. So welcome, Liz, and once Sarah's got you teed up there, you're welcome to proceed. Press the little button.
There we go. Wonderful. Thank you very much. As you noted, I'm Liz Buckton, Senior Policy Planner here at the county. And I'm pleased to be here today to share the updated Housing Action Plan that staff at the county have been working on together with local municipal staff and other partners. What I'd like to do today is just take a few brief moments to share some of the framing and background for the Housing Action Plan and to discuss a little bit about what the plan is and what the plan is not. So the updated Housing Action Plan builds upon prior work by the county and other partners. Over the past 5 years, a number of actions have occurred alongside a pandemic as well, as we've heard about today. And we wanted to highlight a few of those key actions here to kind of show the journey towards this updated Housing Action Plan. So, for example, the Community Improvement Plan program was rolled out by the county with a template and seed funding. We now have the majority of our lower tier municipalities with those plans in place and operational. There's been various different materials and communication resources that have been prepared, including some explainer videos that are included on the Housing for All website portion of the county website. And the county has pursued development charge deferral and exemptions for various different types of housing, including purpose-built rentals and not-for-profit housing. And I've taken a little bit of a look at the stats around that. And so that program has facilitated exemptions for approximately 500 units with another 700 in process currently. So that's seen some good uptake over those years. In 2020, an Affordable Housing Task Force was established, and that task force has helped to guide some of the work that has happened since. In 2021, an Affordable Housing Fund was established with a $1.1 million contribution. There have been additional levy contributions to that fund in 2022 and 23, and my understanding is that fund will have a balance of around $2.9 million by the end of this year. There have been some policy updates that have been completed to the county plan, and a number of the local municipalities have been going through updates to their own official plan processes as well. And through our social services and housing departments, we have pursued a number of builds together with community partners, most recently including the transitional housing build on 14th Street. I personally have been working on the surplus lands project. We are now into the stage where we're investigating a county-owned pilot site and developing some supportive materials that we will be sharing with the member municipalities to help guide how you may wish to explore surplus lands for affordable housing in your own municipalities. And then we've done a deep dive into some of the data to really try and understand where we need to be focusing our efforts. And you'll note that within the Housing Action Plan, there is a link to a previous staff report to the task force that focused in around data, and that was presented back in September. And then all of this have led us here today, where we have undertaken additional consultation with the local municipalities and work together in developing updated actions and priorities for inclusion with the plan in front of you. So as noted, the updated Housing Action Plan does reflect actions in progress that were identified through those prior planning activities and includes these new actions based on some discussion and consensus building with various municipal participation. I think it's very important to note that the actions are focused within our municipal spheres of control and influence. And from a why perspective, why are we here? Why are we doing this? It is grounded in the understanding that there are substantial community as well as individual costs to inaction. So I think there really is that imperative for action, and that underpins the plan. The plan itself is focused in a systems view. And so what we mean by that is that the output of that system, housing, is really, I guess, the result or end output of a vast interrelated network of actors and factors. And so really when we talk about systems change, what we're talking about doing is trying to make all of the little interventions in all of the different areas that we can to try and tilt the system so that the outputs are as we desire them to be, or more so. And again, focusing in on the scope of control. And I think with any complex adaptive system, and so human systems, financial systems, there is always the potential for unintended consequences to arise as well. So what you'll see within the Housing Action Plan is a focus around data and monitoring. And I think it speaks to this living document approach in that as things are changing in all of the various factors that affect the housing system, we'll need to be responsive to that and tweak and amend our plan as we go. And then within the plan itself, it really does focus on a collaborative focus. So there certainly is a leadership or coordination role for the county, but actions are distributed across member municipalities, charitable and nonprofit organizations, business and community agencies, again, within their own spheres of control, so that we're all doing a piece and there's a role for everybody. And so I wanted to speak a little bit to some of those contributing factors, because when we're talking about the scope of control, you know, I think it's important to recognize where that sits relative to all of the other things that are influencing housing outputs. And so monetary policy, for example, so taxes, interest rates, inflation control measures, those are not within our local control. Similarly, the way that our population grows and demographic changes, immigration policy, those are outside of our scope. Lenders set the terms and criteria for financing. The province really kind of establishes that framework legislatively that we're operating within. Land cost, that's market driven, and increasing construction costs. Certainly that is something that's happening also out of our control. Supply chains would be another consideration there. And I think on that cost piece, which is important with respect to new unit creation, through the pandemic, there have been 30 to 50% cost increases in certain inputs to the construction process. So that's clearly going to have an input on achieving affordable housing because the cost of creating housing has increased. Granting programs, we're very fortunate that the federal and provincial government do offer various incentives, but we don't have a say on how much or what the eligibility criteria are or how they are awarded. And then development community, it is at their discretion if they wish to operate locally. Their capacity is within their own control and may be challenged by some of the demographics in the development industry on the go forward, as that industry is facing some large retirement numbers on the horizon. And historically, nonprofit sector has contributed quite a bit to the creation of affordable housing. And being a rural municipality or county, like other rural areas, we have a lesser concentration of nonprofit organizations than you may find in some of the larger centers. So I think you'll note through the plan that we have talked a little bit about that sector capacity and how we might play a role in fostering growth there. And then what's in our control, also very important. So we do have a role in the housing system. And I think there really is an opportunity here to focus in on how we can streamline and align our efforts and processes to support new unit supply and specifically that affordable or deeply affordable supply. So looking at our local community planning and policy framework, we have discretion. We certainly are tasked with the challenging job of coordinating infrastructure concurrent with development in a financially sustainable way. We do have some control and quite a bit of leeway under the Municipal Act with respect to regulatory tools. We do design and implement our approvals processes, and we do set the local fees, charges, tax rates, incentives, and deferrals. And so there's a fair bit of latitude there that we can work with. And so towards affordable housing. And so I think naturally the question then is, well, what is affordable housing? So I think we wanted to just take a brief moment with a beautiful, colorful graphic to the limit of my graphic design skills. And so I thought we could just take a few minutes to walk through this, because I think it does a really excellent job of pulling together household incomes, affordability rates, and the types of housing that people may be able to access in our communities. So this is informed with data obtained through the Housing Assessment Resource Tool out of the University of British Columbia. They've prepared a dashboard, I guess, a portal that pulls in all of the census information. So the most recent census information, and they break down our households by income into different categories. So the way that we can interpret this, and we'll walk through, along the bottom, we have the income groupings. So very low on the left-hand side, all the way up to high on the right-hand side. And so, for example, a household in a very low income category in Grey County, there's almost 1,100 of them. They would be earning up to about $15,600, and that household income is shown along the top of the graphic. So that very low income household, an affordable shelter cost for them would be up to $390 a month. And that's calculated based on 30% of the household income as a general rule of thumb. And so looking into kind of the salmon and yellow colored areas there, we can see the types of community housing options that they may have. So that may be emergency shelter, it could be county or nonprofit run housing in our communities, supportive housing, or perhaps they're in market rentals with a portable rent subsidy. We also see likely that the employee housing would kind of be addressing perhaps those households in low and moderate income. And at the other end of the scale, at the high income, and we see those ownership options becoming available based on the incomes that those households would have. And so we do have approximately 40% of our households falling within that high income category. But I think as we've seen interest rates increase and the sale pricing increase on ownership housing, that does put pressure, I think, on those other housing types on the spectrum. And so the folks in that kind of median income in the dark blue, they traditionally would have been able to access homeownership fairly easily. But I think that is challenging at this point in time. And so I think we are seeing a little bit of a bottleneck there in terms of folks that are able to enter into the housing market. I think what's also very interesting here is how the rental dynamics are playing out. So in the light blue, we have data from CMHC around occupied rental units, and they're identifying that the pricing there is around $1,000 a month for units that are occupied. And maybe that doesn't seem quite so bad, but we went out last year and took a look at the various listings available in our community. And what we're seeing for available rental units is those are priced more in the range of $1,850 a month, often plus utilities on top of that. And so we very well could see folks that could traditionally have occupied rental units achieve that on an affordable basis, but now they're faced with the need to move, or perhaps a business is trying to recruit folks in that are making in that $40,000 to $60,000 range. They may not be able to access listed available units in our community. Sure thing. So I think households, certainly we do have those household counts along the bottom. And in terms of individuals, we do have quite a number of single person households in our community as well. So we're not always talking about dual incomes as well. So I think that's one of the things we do sometimes get hung up on a little bit, is saying, well, you know, they'll have two people, it's two incomes. But I think it's important to note that we do have, I think it's around 35% of households are single individuals. And so that is their single income earning power that then will be achieving housing for them. So I think certainly spend some time with this diagram. It really does tie together that income, maximum affordable household pricing, and the number of households in Grey County together quite nicely. And when we talk about new unit supply, given some of those construction costs that we're looking at for new units, which based on some of the projects we've seen recently could be in the $400,000 to $500,000 a unit range, it's going to be very tricky to bring on new supply that's available to those moderate income households in particular. And so one of the things that the HART model does really, really well through their portal is that also provides an estimate of housing deficit based on core housing need figures. And so they ballpark that we should be targeting somewhere in the 2,000 to 2,600 unit range below that 1,500 unit or $1,500, sorry, a month rental price. And I think that's a very challenging exercise to complete given the costs associated with developing currently. So just a little bit of the challenge there, and it's tricky, but I'm happy to answer any questions relating to this diagram. And certainly within the data report that's linked within the Housing Action Plan, we have done a little bit of meaning making analysis around some of those numbers. So that spells it out, tries to tease out some of those implications there as well. Okay, so I've just got a few brief slides left, just speaking to some of the actions within the plan, and then I'm certainly happy to address questions. So within the plan, we've structured the actions included in terms of existing actions and new actions that have been added. But we thought for the purposes of discussion today, we tried to kind of cluster them on themes. So I think there is a theme of how we go about streamlining our process. And some of the actions within the plan speak to those policy and zoning framework matters. So making sure that those are really good and up to date and are supportive of the types of housing that we're looking to create. We've included there as well the Green Development Standard creation, and that's for that triple bottom line sustainability. So ensuring that as we are also in a climate crisis, that we're making sure that we're addressing that environmental piece. And also, I think that has implications from an affordability standpoint for ongoing utility costs, for example. And then looking at our processes specifically around development approvals, if a developer is able to navigate all of those factors, the lending, the costs, the construction capacity, and bring that application to us, are we in a position to move them through that process in a timely manner, recognizing that often their funding is quite time dependent in terms of how they are able to go forward with those developments. Actions around building our capacity. So as I noted, the nonprofit sector is an important player in terms of new unit creation. And so how can we work with them? How can we support their efforts and help build capacity there? Certainly through different programs and partnership, we have an opportunity to enhance skilled trades education and try and address some of that shortfall in the construction industry based on the demographics. We can be exploring different funding models and tools to try and fit in to make the performer work for that deeply affordable housing. And so we can be looking at, and we will research and identify what might fit here and how we can dovetail our processes and considerations to facilitate those tools locally. We'll be looking at getting all of county council and the local councils together to get onto the same page and really have a common operating picture to work from with respect to the housing crisis. And we have recently established an affordable housing community of practice as well with local municipal members to provide us with some communication infrastructure and an ongoing touch base point for us to do some of this work through. We will be developing various different resource materials. One that's in process currently is an additional residential unit guidebook. And then for that monitoring piece and also to inform grant applications, we'll be looking at data collection and sharing. And I think that will be on a fairly high priority so that we can get some templates and processes in place for 2024. And then finally, under that build the capacity piece, advocacy, I think, is going to play a role within this plan. We will need to determine exactly what our messaging looks like there. But we'll look at how we need to perhaps leverage resources differently, or maybe how the relationships relating to housing work, so that we can really be meeting the needs of our community through housing that's provided. Okay, and then finally, with respect to growing our supply, so the recommendation here is to maintain the Affordable Housing Fund and ongoing contributions to that, so that we have funds available to be a partner in some of these projects. We would proceed with that surplus lands project and development of resources, maintain and enhance community improvement plan incentives, ensuring that those local plans do include affordable housing related incentives. Maintain and enhance DC deferrals and exemptions. And I think this will need a little bit of a tweak because we've had some legislative changes around those, but we will do that and move forward there. And then through social services, continuing to look at those opportunities to build new housing through partnership, specifically for support of our transitional needs, and making sure that we do have good homelessness diversion and support programs in place as well. So I have said a lot of words there. I'm happy to speak to the meaning related to any of that, any questions. But I think the plan itself is jam-packed full of good information. I would certainly encourage you to have a read through and share in your municipalities. And I look forward to our ongoing work here together, because I do think that collective element is where our strength lies. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, very much. It was a lot of information in that report, a lot of good information. Are there any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Warden, and thank you, Liz. Excellent report. I'm sure we can all use it when we're making our decisions. I have two questions. My first one, you didn't refer to tiny houses at all. Is that included in affordable, or is it fully controlled by lower tier municipalities? And my second question is there a communication initiative to educate people about accepting and learning about all types of affordable housing? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Warden, thank you. So tiny houses, certainly within updates to the official plan at the county level, we have referenced tiny houses. I think largely there are limitations in place through the building code, but that still does facilitate fairly small units. And so that would really, I think in most cases, be a function of the local zoning permissions. I know there are a number of municipalities who have removed those minimum square footage requirements that open the door for tiny homes to be a possibility. I think they certainly will have a useful place. I know we have been envisioning them as perhaps having a role through additional residential units, for example. And there are a number of different producers that are coming out with modular tiny homes as well, which may provide a fairly quick opportunity to install new housing. So certainly that is factored in. And then with respect to acceptance, so I think trying to address NIMBY is maybe the thrust there. It's a really nuanced issue, right? Because I think NIMBY kind of stems from uncertainty, fear. In some cases, it's relating to kind of people's social networks and how you interact in your community. You want to support your neighbor who's upset about something. There's a lot of psychology research around the issue of NIMBY. So I think one of the ways that we're going to be looking at that particular issue is through some of the work, actually through our clerks and with the lower tiers, looking about how we structure our public meetings, how we're framing applications and notifying relating to applications. And I think building from some of that research around NIMBY, there are definitely techniques that we can put in place, as well as communication efforts around the importance of affordable housing in our community. Because I think there is stigma associated there in a lot of times, and it's unnecessary. And I think we can address a number of those concerns, but we just need to be able to communicate about those issues together. So thank you very much for your questions. Yes, we'll look at both. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Any other questions? Councillor McQueen?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just to follow up with Councillor Patterson on tiny homes. I know Meaford a number of years back had at the Opera House had a session on tiny homes. I think that needs to come back and update stuff because I think that was sort of the start of the introduction of what's available. And I've always looked at tiny homes as well as, yeah, we have to look at our zoning and our lower tiers, but also the flexibility because of an individual or small family, I guess, or two, tiny homes can be portable. And I think that's key as well, because if it's related to jobs and maybe especially the trades or whatever jobs there is, that there's, you know, these individuals have something that they can move and then at least have a, like a shell over their back, like a turtle, like you have a home, right? I think there's needs to be some flexibility with that. So, thank you.
Or maybe. Very good. Councillor Deckard.
Thank you, Warden, and thank you for the presentation, Liz. You made several references to the not-for-profit corporations and the capacity, you know, they're kind of above capacity, I guess. Now, what do you see as an opportunity to build that capacity, and how can we get, when I look at some of the talent we have in the area from the development side and people who build homes and do all of this, how do we capture some of that talent and get them involved in these not-for-profit corporations and tap into that resource?
And through you, Mr. Warden, thank you. So I guess I think we have to have some conversations with our nonprofit sector to really identify kind of where the challenges are for them in terms of capacity and recruitment. And I think we could all guess. There's a lot of factors in change, demographics, cost of living, both being factors. I think one of the things that will be important is trying to understand kind of the life cycle of the nonprofit sectors. There are certainly interested individuals in our community looking at nonprofit creation, for example, for a development corporation for affordable housing. But I think really trying to figure out the process and where we need to place incentives, whether that's us ourselves or whether that's through community partners like a community foundation, to try and take a fledgling nonprofit, help them get established, and to a point where then our other incentives would be available to help them through developing new housing. So I think kind of that arc, that life cycle arc, is something that I'd really like to take a look at through those communications to see how we can be supporting the creation of new nonprofits, and really try and pick their brains in terms of what they've tried thus far to grow capacity and what interventions we might be in the unique position to assist with in growing that capacity. I think it will be challenging, of course, though, because nonprofits do pull from community capacity, and as we know, that is a challenge for many right now in terms of that recruitment and retention for those nonprofits. So we've got our work cut out for us there, but lots of energy behind it anyhow. Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Liz, for your presentation. And you'll get my drift, so to speak, as we're talking about nonprofits. Is there anything within the plan to support already existing low-income housing that could assist a nonprofit organization to expand or update or renovate said housing?
That microphone always throws me off. Thank you very much for your question, and through you, Warden. So not specifically at this point, but I do think through social services, and I think Anne-Marie would probably be better to speak to that than I. We do have relationships with operating nonprofits currently. I think we need to be having some of those conversations to understand really what the challenges are. And I know of examples where, the math just isn't working on existing developments where you're limited in terms of what you can charge for rental revenue, but the costs don't stop increasing over time. So we don't have that specifically laid out at this point, but I think there is the opportunity to have those conversations and together with social services, really put our heads together to determine how we move forward to support them in the ways that they need. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Matrosovs, and then Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Through you, the warden, thank you very much for this update. To tie on to the conversation that we've been hearing about the nonprofit organizations, how are we addressing not dropping off at the end of our county boundaries? You know, because so many of our nonprofit organizations, for example, will work, you know, our South Georgian Bay Mayors and CAOs Forum identifies very, very quickly that there are many nonprofit organizations that span across into Simcoe County, and I'm sure over in the Hanover way, you know, there's going to be some sort of expanse over on the Bruce County side. So how do we coordinate so that we're not reinventing wheels and we're not creating silos on the ends of our boundaries?
Thank you very much for that question. I love that question. I think there really is an opportunity for us to build that network. I know at a staff level that is happening right now, that we are kind of working in conjunction with counterparts at Simcoe County and in the town of Collingwood as well. They're going through a master planning process right now relating to housing. We are in ongoing contact with our counterparts at Bruce and Huron and Dufferin. And so I think it's really maybe strengthening some of that interrelationship between us and making sure that we are sharing ideas. So that's happening at the government level. I don't know that we've necessarily got into those discussions at a nonprofit to nonprofit level, but I definitely think that the work has begun, I would say, in terms of that cross relationship. Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Warden, and thanks for the presentation, Liz. Also, you did an excellent job one night at the Harmony Center in Owen Sound, working with other partners and engaged stakeholders. So that's going to lead me into my first question. Second question then has to do with household income. So the first, right off the bat, you said, and other partners. I'm aware of some or many of the partners that you've engaged and built the plan off of. I'm just interested in terms of how much we've worked with builders and had their engagement and their input in terms of driving this. The second question is the plan references household income, and mortgages are paid with after-tax dollars. So disposable income is a more accurate reflection of how people can or what they can afford. So what kind of considerations perhaps went back and forth on where that 30% is derived from, household versus disposable? And then secondly, or thirdly, well, answer those and then I have some just final comments. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. So in terms of other partners, so there has been some discussion with the building community, and I know prior to my arrival here, staff had reached out to various members of the development community and did some interviews to help inform some of the actions. I think there is an opportunity to renew that. I think a lot of things have changed over the past few years, especially through the pandemic. And so I would really like to see that be a consideration in terms of future discussions. I think prioritization, of course, is going to be important. So I think really making sure that we're all in a place of common understanding and have the infrastructure in place for us to be working together and align on these issues is a top priority. But ultimately, I think the development community who are actually going to build the units that we need do need to be at the table and involved in those discussions. I do think, however, that we have tried to reflect the input received to date and can pursue those additional conversations. Yeah, so I think I'll leave that one there. There's more discussion to have. With respect to household incomes, so the 30%, that's not our number. That's kind of the rule of thumb within the industry. And I think it comes down to data sources, is that it's extraordinarily hard to discern then what is really their disposable income. And I think in particular, when we're looking at those lower income households, 30% of not very much money is still not very much money, right? Like we really are limited in terms of how we can understand those figures. There are different researchers, and so I've been trying to follow along with some of the academic research that's going on as well. And I know like the consideration of equity comes into the picture as well. So household incomes don't reflect what equity people may have already. So there is some emerging research there trying to discern really who is struggling in terms of accessing purchase housing, for example. And I think in a large amount of cases, I think the number was in around 50% of buyers don't have equity to bring to the table. Those would be your first time home buyers, for example. So they may be able or maybe in a position of challenge versus others who would have gained significant equity over the past few years as property values have increased as well. So getting at that, what's left over at the end of the day piece and trying to target interventions through that lens, I think it's just really a matter of the data piece. So we can certainly try and refine that down to understand who has what resources available. But I think in terms of our targeted kind of missing middle or 4th to 6th household income deciles, we're talking about a constrained budget, whether it's 30%, whether it's 50%. And so we know that the current market rate is not necessarily going to serve them. So rather than getting too tied down in the specific, is it $1,500? Is it $1,200? That's an affordable rent. I think as a principle, we're looking for below market units because we just understand that the math doesn't work for those other ones in broad strokes.
And thank you for that. I think it's important. I mean, this is really tough times and it will be for the next 10 or 15 years for so many people. But there is relief coming for some. And that's when the baby boomers pass on and there's the greatest transfer of wealth that we've ever seen. But it doesn't help them right now. On an ongoing basis, if we went back a few slides, you had a really good chart there in terms of its columnar and where households kind of exist in Grey Bruce, that chart there. So using Grey Bruce year-to-date home sales, the average home has been year-to-date 644,000. So just a couple scribbles with 10% down, that's $3,777 a month in mortgage costs, not including insurance. The median household income, if we use our numbers of $78,000, is $6,500 a month. So for affordability, 30% of what our median household income is in Grey Bruce is really $1,950 a month. That's it. And we're seeing right now in Grey Bruce, $3,777 is what you need for a mortgage. And, average versus average, there'll be some fluctuation, but largely those will be parallel. So we have some ability to reduce and control the spending that we have here at municipal levels, single tier, at this tier. But we have limited ability in that chart for that group in the two shades of blue to assume the burden of this plan. And I'm wondering, what do we do now? And we have got to pound at the federal government. They cannot abdicate their responsibility on housing. They are a big part of creating where we are now. So what is our strategy, I guess, in terms of hammering away at the federal government? They have the most money coming in. They have the ability to support this if they choose, and they should be, because this is paramount to so many people in our community. And that's where the monies and the support needs to come from.
Great, thank you very much. So I think you've begun our discussion then around what does that advocacy look like, right? That I do think that there is an opportunity for a different funding structure. What that looks like, I don't know. But there are certainly lots of academic minds thinking about that right now. A number of the universities have research groups kind of forming around that exact question. And I think one of the ones of particular interest is the Data Collaborative at McMaster University, where they're really looking at kind of the systemic factors affecting housing affordability. And one of the findings that they identify is that there are policy gaps or disconnects between federal, provincial, and local governments and how we're structuring the sharing of roles and the sharing of financial resources. So I think there could be some really good information coming from that group that we can be paying attention to as we're talking about those advocacy messaging. Because certainly, I think municipal taxation has its limitations, right? As a tool for raising revenue. It's designed for fairly specific functions. And to share that burden on a tax levy with everybody, recognizing that 60% of our population, right, 60% of our households are falling below that high income category, which would have access to homeownership. Putting that burden onto that 60% is not going to improve situation any, right? So I think certainly there is room for lots of discussion, and I think we can dive into those discussions around how we want to focus our advocacy messages. But I do think we need to be tying into those researchers that are really looking at it from that big picture lens and trying to put the pieces together from that systemic standpoint. There are many voices indicating that it is time for a change in that relationship. So, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Thanks very much, Liz, for all the information. And yes, we do have our work cut out for me. Just to follow up on what Councillor Gregg was mentioning, I guess I'm curious about what sort of advocacy and how we start that process with the federal government, with our provincial counterparts. It is primarily, they have the deepest pockets. It is primarily their responsibility. In our last community services report, I think we had 1,900 units that were subsidized within Grey County. And the question was asked about how many we need, and the answer I think was 2,000. So that's quite a gap. Scott Taylor talked about the Housing Accelerator Fund that was primarily geared towards large urban centers, and really it was very difficult for rural municipalities to apply for that. So that's where I think the advocacy, and I guess I'm wondering where we start that. How do we advocate for rural municipalities? The urban centers seem to be, the squeaky wheels and are getting most of the funding. They have all the people coming in through our immigration policies, and it's on the news all the time. But we have real struggles here within Grey County. So we need to amplify that voice, with higher levels of government. So I don't know through deputations or how we start that process, but it does need to begin. Thanks.
Kim, do you want to respond to that?
Just a little bit, just to add on to the great points that Liz has already made. I think what the heart chart shows, and we've talked about, is the critical challenge that is very difficult to address is the one around rental housing, right? The single family homes, and that's and the affordability of those is a different question than the really critical need that there is for people to have an affordable rental apartment to be able to live in. And those affordable rental apartments are going to be either secondary units in an existing single family situation, infill, but they're going to be in settlement areas and on services. And servicing capacity, and who has the wherewithal to extend servicing capacity, how much more can you take on? And all of those questions, I think, are things that would bear some further discussion when we get to the housing forum in the fall. I think is, what's it going to take to be able to move these things forward, and what capacity do we have? If a developer came to us tomorrow and said, I want to do this, what, in hard numbers, what is he facing or she facing as far as what would need to make that project go? And do we have the capacity to be able to support it? And so I think there's some examples and case study kind of work that we could all do to better understand where we are right now and what tweaks might be beneficial.
So I just wanted to note that, so there is some parallel work that's occurring. So through the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, I know one of the things that they're looking at is kind of that ecosystem for social finance, seeing that as a potential opportunity here. So as Kim notes, ultimately a developer is pulling together a pro forma, identifying their costs, identifying their funding to see if a project will work. And so is there an opportunity either through partnership and use of funds that we may have as local government organizations, or is there an opportunity in our communities for wealth capture to be directing into some of these projects? So I just wanted to note that that conversation is kind of happening in parallel here. And so I think there may be some solutions that come out of that discussion, and that's been happening in conjunction with an Innovation Canada lab, I guess is what they've been tied into through that process. So there's a lot of minds thinking on that exact question of how do we really put the funds necessary to get to the affordability we need. I think the other conversation that we haven't had and maybe fits in here somewhere is on the income side as well. So talking about wages, talking about benefit rates as well. So there's a lot of different factors that all tie into it. I really hope that we will have that opportunity when we come together for the forum in the fall to talk through some of these issues in greater detail. And I really think perhaps there's an opportunity there as well to start having that discussion around advocacy, you know, looking at who's doing what already. Is there a group that we can be partnering with in their messaging, or is there the need for a meet and grade solution that we would pursue on our own or with other partners? So lots of good discussion to come.
Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Warden Millen. And earlier in your comments, Liz, you spoke about what is under municipal control. And it was something that tweaked me. How much of that, I think Councillor Gregg spoke about, you know, the average medium home today being built is 600 and, what did you say, Scott, $625,000, $620,000. And part of the problem is the cost of building supplies and everything else that's gone up. But in talking to a few contractors, and I don't talk to all that work in Grey County or Wellington County or in the surrounding communities, how much of that is red tape that's under our control that goes into a house? From engineering, from peer reviewing of engineering that has gone into this, from conservation. We want to build a house on this lot, conservation permit, The lot right next door to it, 50 feet to the next, gets severed off or whatnot. Well, we need another permit. Our premier of the day said, when he was first elected, I remember him saying that, you know, he was going to cut red tape. And the premier before that, the Liberal said that for every policy that come in, you had to get rid of one barrier. I'm not sure that anyone at our provincial level, and certainly not at the federal level, has ever caught on to that. From what I've understood, in the average $620,000 home, before anything ever gets done, it's north of $125,000 is just getting a stamp of approval from building officials, from everybody that is smart, good paying job. But that's before they even start building. How much of that do we subsidize? Or could we subsidize by just getting rid of it and bringing down the cost of homes? It's probably a question that will go forward to the housing forum going forward. I'm not looking, it's just something that's been totally frustrating for a number of years for me. Our forefathers built this province and whatnot. They walked up through a bush on a trail someplace, hacked down a few logs, built a home that we've seen a number of them out there and raised families in them. I didn't see any permits. But we got here because they were able to do that. And yet we won't let anybody build anything anymore without hundreds of $1,000s worth of permits. Is that where we, under municipal control, can really make a great support in identifying these and making it affordable and attainable?
Scott Taylor is just jumping up and down back there. He'd like to go with this one. So I'm going to defer to Mr. Taylor. Although it is getting perilous. Yeah, almost.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you, and thank you for your question, Councillor Eccles. And to build on some of your comments and some of the comments we heard from Councillor Gregg, we know that our county and municipal processes wear some of this blame, if you will. And we as staff are working together to look at further efficiencies and further changes to our processes that can aid in the provincial government's goal of seeing more homes built quicker. More specifically, we're really trying to, as Liz has spoken to, look at targeted interventions or specific process changes that will really aid in the creation of more affordable and attainable housing in that regard. And so we will be seeing a report come forward to this table, likely early in the fall, maybe right around the time of the housing forum, with some recommended changes to our processes. We've been working on that alongside municipal staff. We hope to share the draft with municipal staff here very soon, and then bring that back forward to the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee as well as County Council in that regard. We have also been chatting with developers, and this gets back to Councillor Gregg's comments. We did some interviews throughout the pandemic, specifically with large rental home providers or rental providers in terms of what makes a difference to their bottom line. So when we look at our conditional development charge exemption agreements, when we look at our processing times, what are the key things that really make a difference to them versus what's kind of just lip speak? And we've heard loud and clear that speed and that efficiency to get things done is paramount. Other things like the development charges exemptions have been tremendously beneficial, as Liz shared some of the stats of the amount of rentals we've seen in the last few years through the county doing that, and a number of our member municipalities also leading the charge in looking at development charges exemptions locally too. That definitely has helped. There's further changes afoot with respect to some of the provincial government's changes to the Development Charges Act that aren't quite in force yet, but we think might have an impact too. Those also have an impact on our municipal finances and our abilities to get things done. The message has been heard loud and clear that we need to become more efficient, clear some of those hurdles that maybe are more discretionary in nature without impacting public health and safety or the impact on our natural environment in that regard. So a long-winded way of saying more to come on this, and we hope to have this discussion with council, both at the county level and hopefully at your municipal tables as well, about some adjustments we can make to our process to become more efficient, to look at a speedier approval rate. Finally, one developer had shared with us, this was a large rental developer. This wasn't in Gray, but they had a situation where they had a staff report on the agenda that was ready to go. It didn't quite get on that agenda, and it got pushed to the next month, and that cost them $1 million. And so hearing messaging like that, I think, is important at a staff level and a council level. And I guess I'd put in a plug here, not to step on Liz's toes, but if there are voices or topics that council thinks they want to hear more about at this housing forum, we really want this to be both an informative and frank discussion. So if we need to hear from voices aside from staff, maybe it's not-for-profit voices, maybe it's the builders and developers themselves, please let us know if you have any suggestions. More than happy to try to coordinate that alongside your municipal staff and hopefully have a really good discussion. And as Liz said, come away with a common understanding and hopefully this common work plan that we can all work towards together.
So I think we can agree that it is a very complex issue. And if anyone is, well, I hope everyone is planning to attend the housing forum, wear comfortable footwear. It's going to be a long meeting. It's going to be a good meeting, and it's going to be a lot of discussion. So bring your pail as well, because we're not going to be just there for an hour. In any case, Liz, thank you very much. Unless there is someone else that has a burning desire, and I'm not going to look at Mr. Eccles to add something, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? That is adopted. Thank you very much. Liz, excellent report. I see Kevin's on his feet, but I'm gonna say let's take a 10-minute break, or as short a break as we can get away with, but no longer than 10 minutes. So we'll reconvene at 1:45. 1 minute warning. Okay, we'll bring the meeting back to order. We have our Director of Paramedic Services here, Kevin McNabb. He's going to be speaking on a report regarding comprehensive deployment review, implementation plan, modification and funding requirements. So Kevin, welcome, and you have the floor, sir. Oh, we need a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Keaveney and Councillor Matrosovs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Warden and County Council, and Mary Lou is going to join me as well. She'll be speaking to the financial component of this. And I just want to say thanks to Mary Lou and Garrett and Kim CAO for the work on this. There's lots of moving parts, and we've been working on this for a while to bring this information to you. So thanks to them. So the motions were there, but what we're looking for today is a support and principle of the modified implementation plan to include 4 additional bases. Support the development of a project plan and cost estimates for the Durham base to be built in 2024. And then to support the development of a long-term financing plan to implement this over the next 10 or 11 years. So this journey started in 2021. We were asked about improving response times throughout the county and in addressing growth and where we would go next. And we received approval in the 2022 budget to do a comprehensive deployment review that was done by Operational Research and Health, ORH. They did a lot of work through 2022, and then we reported this back in earlier this year, which council supported in principle the fundamentals of what their suggestions were. And we've been working off that document, preparing to go forward. So this reports will give an overview of the budget requirements for the implementation and also a recommendation on some modifications to the plan. So just around call volume this year to date to June 30th, it's comparable to 2022. To the end of June 30th, we were a bit under. Looked at July, we're a bit over, but generally comparable. But in 2022, it was our highest call volume to date. It was 14,951, but an 11.8% increase over 2021, which was our previous busiest year. So each year it's been getting busier. The 2022 call volume is 4,000 calls over where it was in 2012, where we developed this response time plan. And also that's not in there is we did refocus our energies on response to emergencies, and there's about 2,400 calls that we've reduced out of the non-emerge that have been focused on the emergency. That increase would have been around 6,400 if we didn't divert. We only do about 200 or 300 transfers now. In the last 5 years, we continue to see increases about 33.6% in the last 5 years. And if you remember the ORH graph, they're predicting on average, some up, some down, but on average over the next 10 years is a 68% increase or a 5.8% per year. And I would say probably the last 10 years is probably not far off that. Response times, I'm happy to report that response times to date, we're actually meeting and doing quite well in all areas. That was till to June 30th. The The county, though, in the last 7 years, we've only really met that CTAS target once. Our 90th percentile for all code fours was 1430, which is really good. And it's been between that range of 1430 and 1555 for the last 15 years, with last year being, I believe, the 1555. Every 3 years, we do the Ministry of Health does an ambulance service review to ensure we meet the requirements of the legislation to run an ambulance service. The last review was done in 2022, and we are just waiting on the final report, which we will bring back to council. We had 3 observations, which is, you don't want any observations, but 230 questions, that's pretty good. Well, one of them was around not meeting our response time targets. So it was meant as an observation, and we did speak about the things that we were working on to improve response times. It's not all about just putting resources at it and doing more calls. I think we have to think differently. We have to be innovative. We've been asked to modernize since 2018, which I think we've been trying to do a good job of that here. We think about things around treat and refer, treat and release, alternate destination pathways, and just doing calls and thinking differently, and also in the signs of prevention. And I would say that, Grey County, we, pretty proud of the leadership that we do in this area, that we don't just, sit back and wait for the call volumes to increase. We try to do what we can to mitigate some of that. And the most important part of this is we help members of our community, mostly by connecting them to other resources. So we have the community paramedic home visit program, which is an expanded scope of care for paramedics to treat people in the home. We run our health clinics at our community housing buildings. We have a screening for older adults that are at risk, and we offer referrals to home and community care and to 211 for social support, and to rapid access addiction medicine for people that with addictions problems. We have treat and refer program for palliative symptom management, which is new, and we're really excited about this. We've been making a difference in people's lives about treating them in their home and not have to transport. It saves us being locked up in an emergency room, but most importantly, allows us to accommodate the goals of care of a patient. And if a goal of care isn't meeting where it needs to be, we can take them directly to the hospice now, which is good. We couldn't do that before. It actually saves a transfer later on down the road. We have a patient navigator program we use for high use callers, identify them and try to connect them to community resources. We were supportive outreach services, which we've done a presentation on that, and continue to work in the community around addictions and mental health. I look forward to this one. This is a big one that I think that we need to look at. In 2022, we had 2,500 calls for falls, and we're working with our OHT and some partners out of St. Joe's, and actually we probably got about 10 partners. We had lots of partners who want to work with us about working on people that fall at home and try to prevent and put some interventions in place around that. So that's work is ongoing right now to be hopefully brought forward back in 2024. And the idea would be that is to stop, people from falling in the multi-callers and put interventions and referrals in place to help people. And then also this year, if you'd asked me a year ago if we had an offload problem, I'd say, yeah, every now and again we have offload problems. But in the last year and a half, we've seen significant offload at Owen Sound Hospital. And it's during certain times of the year, but there are times where we have 2 or 3 ambulances locked up there and nowhere to go for a few hours at a time. So we did put in for dedicated offload nurse funding for the first time, and we're waiting to hear back on approvals on that. So the recommended resources, the ORH, they had a phased in plan. And what they recommended is to meet the 15-minute 90th response time, which when we talked with ORH, the options were presented to us was do nothing, maintain, and then also to improve upon response times where we are today. We stuck with the maintain and err on the side of some improvement as we do this. When they looked at the call volumes in our area and what we were facing, they said in 2022, for us to meet the 90th percentile 15 minutes on a consistent basis, we'd need approximately a 17% increase in resources, or 252 hours of ambulance hours per week. We'd already missed the 2023 budget deadline by that time. But what we are wanting to do now is to begin to implement that in the 2024 budget. Over the next 10 years, what it looks like is 672 hours of ambulance hours into the system spread over the next 10 years. And that would also include taking our first response unit and using those dollars to put into an ambulance would save roughly a half a 12-hour shift. What that works out to is 7 extra day cars and 1 extra night car. And one of those day cars would be like an evening, like anywhere between a 10 to 10 or a 12 to 12 in Owen Sound to help with those peak periods. Again, we can run that through the model when the time comes for that. Also part of this, it was recognized that Feversham is an area of the county, and we've been talking about that for a while, about an area of the county that needs coverage, and that was recommended to build a base there. When you break all this down, and ORH did mention this, but they didn't take it as far as actually breaking it down to what we would need to accommodate this. One of our issues will be is indoor parking spaces, where we need to protect the fleet from medical supplies and equipment from the cold, and also to facilitate response times. You can't really have vehicles all covered in snow or super hot in the summer. And we need the existing bases, to house these spare vehicles and also to facilitate shift trades. So there's the option would be is we could do renovations maybe at some bases. I don't know if all would be able to do that, but is to build extra parking spaces for indoors, or you could rent, lease, or build a large facility for to store vehicles. But it really doesn't help having those vehicles available at a base where we can keep an eye on our equipment and supplies, and also have them available for shift trade. Like in Dundalk right now, if a crew is out on a call, they and the night car comes in, they're really kind of landlocked because they can't go out, they don't have a truck. So having a spare at each base allows them to start right away, it gets coverage, and then it also relieves that car that's on overtime, if at all possible, if they're on standby. So we looked at this, and part of the ORH plan for improving response times was to build bases in these other places: Feversham, Ayton, Thornbury, Cobble Beach, and Holstein. But they recommended additional staffing for those places. What we plan to do is actually utilize the staffing of that 672 hours at these bases. So I already kind of went through the slide here, but again, we're not looking at increasing the staffing that ORH recommended. We are actually just looking, so the car that would be upstaffing Hanover when Ayton was built, it would go there. When Meaford and is upstaffed, that car would go to Thornbury. Owen Sound, one of their cars would go to Cobble Beach, and Durham, one of their cars would go to Holstein. And what that does, and it's kind of like, I think it's the best philosophy for rural Ontario. If you have two paramedic crews looking at each other in a system, you're probably not covering the county the way you should. You should be spreading out those resources to the best of your ability. We obviously want the best response time for all the areas of the county. We generally, we protect the areas of the largest core where most of the calls are going to take place. But if you have an opportunity to spread those resources out, I think it's a good use in rural Ontario to do that. So we do have the modeling now tool that we, taking our data, and we can run numbers and run things through different scenarios. So this would look like in 2033 with our increased call volume of 68% and our resources. You can see we broke it down at 8, 10, and 15-minute response times, and then also looked at our average, and that's what it would look like. And then this is what it would look like when we add these extra bases with no additional resources. And then here is where you'd see they're not huge increases, but there are some significant ones. If you look in the Blue Mountains area and Georgian Bluffs and Owen Sound and Meaford and Hanover, they're down a bit, but Owen Sound and Hanover are really where our best area is right now. Like if you look at the percentages of where they're at. So this is a chart to lay out kind of what our recommended plan would be over the next 10 years. We're requesting permission to move up the Durham base, and we'll talk about that in a second, to the 2024. Add the additional 12-hour shift in Hanover and Owen Sound. And then 2025, add the Feversham base. And then also add a car in Meaford and Feversham. Part of that would be half of that first response unit from Markdale would be go to Feversham. And in 2026 would be build a base in Ayton. In 2027, build a base in Thornbury, and then add that late shift in Owen Sound. It would be like a 10 to 10, 12 to 12. 2028 would be Cobble Beach base build. 2029 would be a Holstein base build and a Durham day shift. And then 2031 and 2033, there'd be a car, 2031, a car in Owen Sound for nights, and a car in Craigleith on days. If you can see here, a majority of our call volume is through the day. And what we want to do is cover where the most of these calls are happening, and that's during that period between. Generally, it starts ramping up at 8 o'clock at night 8 o'clock in the morning, and it goes down somewhere around 8 or 9 at night. And that's where we want to cover the majority of those times. So the Durham base build has been in the capital plan for probably 4 years now. We've been building up our money in reserve to move ahead with it in 2025. It included 4 indoor parking spaces, and we were kind of modeling it at the time, even before the ORH report, of what we knew was a good base build was the Craigleith size. But what we're proposing is, you know, and it was mentioned in the ORH report, we are busting at the seams for places to put admin. And also a big part of this is our supplies and equipment is to move our central stores to Durham. We get it out of Owen Sound. It's already at its peak there. Craigleith, we do have some storage there, but it's on, you know, far end of the county. So the idea would be is that we would increase that size at the Durham base roughly by about 2,000 square feet. And we'd be able to keep our administrative offices, central storage there. And also just in the last short period of time, there's also been an opportunity to share lands with West Grey Police Services on their site, just Chester Street and Grey Road 4, but on that land there. For us, it's a very favorable position for us to be on. We enter onto a county road, and you know, we're on the site with another emergency service, and hopefully would help facilitate a good spot for a base there. We're looking at cost control measures, and what we want to do is create efficient and effective and purpose-built bases, you know, that meet the needs of staff and also improve response times. We think by using our Craigleith design, it can be based upon modulars where you have the crew area. It could be a 2 or 4 bay, or we could even add an addition on the side of that by using, again, hopefully saving some engineering costs around to house this logistics and an administrative area. The Craigleith design has been proven functional and it meets all our needs. We hope to be able to, you know, if we are able to go ahead with this, is be able to hopefully have some savings around, instead of engineering a new base at every place, is to use that same plan. We may have to do some site work, but the plan could remain the same. And they're also, even though Craigleith is functional, we still are engaging staff to ensure that we know we're going to maximize, you know, the best we can of each base. Also, part of the report is administrative supervisory support to maintain a 28-to-1 ratio as we bring on new staff to meet these new enhancements. We will need another supervisor in 2025 and 2031. Eventually, what you most likely see is a supervisor in the north and a supervisor in the south. And the supervisor in the south would most likely just be a day shift when they're during our busiest peak periods. Scheduling right now, we have it available Monday to Friday, but they're often quite often times where our supervisor, you know, on a Saturday afternoon where it's really busy, there's nobody around to fill shifts, and they're in the office for 2 or 3 hours, and there's significant calls happening. You know, they can't leave the office because they have to make sure the shifts are filled for the night. And we think it'd be best served to have scheduling support 7 days a week. And we're just in talking with HR that potentially by the time this comes around, there might be a potential to do like a corporate wide scheduling for all of the different departments. Okay, so Mary Lou's just going to help with the funding portion of this.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the grant is calculated. So the province provides us an annual grant, and it's a maximum of 50% of the prior year's operating budget expenditures. So one of the keywords there is budgeted. So if we go under budget, there's a potential for a clawback. If we're over budget, there's no additional funding. They say, thank you very much for your contribution. Eligible expenditures, this is just accounting speak. They include things like amortization, so depreciation, the future benefit costs and future WSIB costs, less any one-time expenditures. And in about 2018, they discontinued the adjustment for inflation in the grant calculation. And there is a timing difference in the amount of funding received compared to the budgeted levy expenditures because they're looking at the prior year. So meaning the grant versus the levy will never be a 50-50 split. And the full cost of enhancements is covered by the county in the first year, which is typically why we recommend we'll fund that portion from reserve because we're not increasing the levy in order to have a levy decrease the following year. So we're trying to stabilize. As far as operating expenditures, speaking to what Kevin was discussing a few minutes ago about increasing your staffing complement, it's important to notice that paramedics and supervisors, so they're compensated for 2184 hours a year, and they're backfilled for vacation, training, sick, etc. It's not like finance where if I go on vacation, no one does my job. That's the joy of a 24/7 operation, no different than long-term care. So the estimated cost for each enhancement, inclusive of benefits, for a 12-hour ambulance staffed with 2 paramedics 7 days a week is $675,000. The cost of a supervisor with backfill is $204,000. So it's important to know that we're not paying the supervisor $204,000. That's including the backfill in order to have that position available 365 days of the year. And our estimate for utilities and maintenance is about $24,000 a year for each base. For ambulances and equipment, so in order to maintain the ratio of frontline ambulances to spares and taking into account the proposed service enhancements, there'd be an additional 11 ambulances required. So each ambulance includes a power stretcher, automated vehicle locator, which we call AVL, mobile Wi-Fi, tablet computer, there's a stair chair, cardiac monitor and defib, as well as the mechanical compression device that was approved this February. The provincial funding model requires that the county funds 100% of the asset purchase. And then on a go-forward basis, they will give us their 50% contribution based on the annual amortization over the life of the asset. So we're funding everything up front. In 2023, the cost for the ambulance and all the equipment it carries was just under $360,000. And then based on current market trends, we anticipate an inflationary increase of 3.5% a year. The cost for the additional 5 bases is about $1.5 million in 2023 dollars. And the 6 bases, so Durham plus the 5 additional, would be funded by debenture. That's how we've handled Craigleith, Chatsworth, which will be paid off in 2031. And so the cost of the debentures by 2029 is estimated to be $825,200. And this assumes a 25-year amortization with a 5% interest rate. And of course, this will impact our annual repayment limit and reduce the amount available for other county projects. So debentures are funded by levy, and the province will provide funding for the interest portion of the debenture if we finance it externally. They will not provide subsidy on if we borrow from ourselves. And they also, as I mentioned previously, will provide funding based on the amortization of the building over the life of the asset.
So as you can see here, there's been many assumptions, call volume, response times, there's the financial component of this and supplies and equipment. And so we've done our best actually is to lay it out over the next 10 years of what this looks like. But, you know, we will continue to monitor this and monitor call volumes, response times, budgetary requirements, and then bring back each year to council with our response time report, feedback on the plan. And then if there's any updates from council, then we would make those adjustments at that time. So the financial and resource implications, the net 23 levy for paramedic services is $8,259,900. The preliminary financing plan would see this over the next year-over-year increase of an average of $465,300. And we will bring forward more information in the 2024 budget process around the long-term financing strategy.
Thank you, Kevin and Mary Lou. Very good report. Lots of information there. Any questions from council? Councillor McKay.
Yes, thanks, through you, Warden. I can see where, some of these new bases are needed. I kind of question Thornbury base. You got Craigleith, you got Meaford. So you want to stick one in the middle? And have you ever said the response times into Thornbury from a unit out of Craigleith or a unit out of Meaford? What difference would it make much? Like what is the call volume around Thornbury area compared to Craigleith or Meaford?
Yeah, I would say probably the response time into Thornbury out of Meaford or Craigleith, you're probably looking around the 12-minute mark. That's probably what it is to get in there, 12 to 15 minutes. When we first did the ORH modeling, when we did a total base look, where we had a clean slate and we tried to see if our bases were in the best optimal location, it actually came up that Thornbury would actually supersede Chatsworth as far as the best impact, based upon call volume and response times and stuff like that. But what happened there is that if you move that base there would be degradation of time to the Owen Sound area. So it was felt that it was in the right location, but Thornbury was mentioned as an ideal location for a base during the ORH study.
Any other questions? Counselor Gregg. Oh, and I see Counselor Nielsen online, so I'll take you next, Dane. Go ahead, Counselor Gregg.
Darn, I was hoping he'd go to Dane first. Just building a little bit off Councillor McKay's comments. When I was reading through here, if we're talking about going green and gray, obviously everything that we construct has a carbon cost. Cobble Beach and Thornbury jumped out to me as well. And in these communities, and not so much Cobble Beach, but Shallow Lake, not so far removed from Cobble Beach, is there, or have we considered evaluating the opportunities to lease existing buildings, properties? Often the small towns do have properties which may offer themselves to something that warrants looking at, as opposed to the county constructing a base and kind of looks like we're going for every municipality or every town throughout the county at this point. And there's a cost, and I'm just not sure that private enterprise would look to construct with the same need as opposed to considering leasing opportunities for what might be out there already.
Kim, you want to take that one?
So we have had some conversations about, and this is, I think, what Kevin mentioned about the fact that this is a rolling plan. And so we do want to investigate opportunities. And if there is something like that, certainly we want to explore it. But as Kevin mentioned, the environmental aspect of whatever facility the buildings are housed in is really critical, right? It has to be climate controlled and it has to be secure. You can imagine that the ambulances and the things that are on them would be an attractive target. The other piece, not directly related to this, is that in Georgian Bluffs, there's another conversation about the transportation fleet and potentially the need for some parking spaces for plows as well. So there's another need that we may be able to satisfy here as well. But certainly we are conscious of the fact that if there are other opportunities that would be more cost effective, we want to explore those as well. We don't want to, we're not dismissing anything out of hand. What we would wanted today, though, was to let you know what the plan looks like going forward and to get at least your approval in principle to continue on. The alternative is over time, our service standards will need to decline if we don't keep up. So.
You want to add something, Kevin? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this report and what we're requesting, and then we do have a 10-year plan, and this will far beyond my time here. But I really think that we also should think about 10 and 20 years, that these bases are probably good for 40 years or more. And there will be a time, I believe, if the growth happens, that we will need bases in Thornbury and Cobble Beach, and potentially that they increases for sure, like night shifts in those areas, and potentially even night shifts in Holstein and Ayton, depending upon the development in those areas. So by investing just in that same area, we haven't really done anything other than build just bigger there. So I think we should look at the most optimal, base build, whether that's a private partnership or redevelopment or build our own base. There are certain requirements, and sometimes I'm not sure if it's cheaper to build or to remodel or to modify. I don't know. We can do that analysis when that time comes. But I think that, we talk about 11-year plan, but I really hope that this sets us on a plan for longer than 11 years.
Counselor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden Milne. Just a couple of questions regarding the Durham build. Have we considered utilizing Rockwood Terrace lands? We've changed the scope in terms of what will be built on those lands as a location. Is there cost savings to utilizing land that the county already owns versus partnering with the West Grey Police? And just fully understanding for myself, it sounds like the plan is to have a paramedics bay kind of engineering design as a standalone building in all of these locations. Is there conversations to be had with, if we're working with the West Grey Police, to build an addition to the building so that there's some cost savings in terms of materials, location? Or is the concept to just have that kind of stamped ability to say every new base we build will have the exact same footprint and engineering as its own standalone building in all these locations?
As far as the standardized base design, we did have some preliminary, or Kim's actually spoke with the engineer that did the preliminary plan, and the potential is to use the existing plan that we have to have a standard template for the bases going forward. As far as the Rockwood plan, I believe there, and maybe Kim can speak to the better that than I can, but there has been some changes that made us look at this other area.
The council will know that when we adjusted the site plan to Rockwood Terrace and we moved that building forward, we know the parking areas changed on the site plan. So the piece of property that might have been suitable for the paramedic base is no longer available to us. And there was always a consideration in that particular location. The fact that it kind of back in and is going to go through, residential area. There's a school there and a daycare and some things like that. So it was never actually an ideal location. So then when the opportunity came that there might be an available parcel adjacent to the new police build, because that's on the county road and it gives a really good fast access in three different directions. It was something that we thought was worth looking into and moving forward in that direction. This keeps, since we don't have the space at the site where Rockwood Terrace is being built, the only other property that we own there is across the road, the other greenfield site. And I think the thinking was to kind of try and keep that whole to make that a more attractive opportunity for future development. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Mackey.
Thanks very much, Mr. Warden. I appreciate the comments from my colleagues in regards to the county looking at when municipalities are building other centers, and I was thinking about the new police station in West Grey, and I do appreciate, as I understand from Kevin, West Grey is giving us the land for a ambulance bay down there. So, we do appreciate that on behalf of County Council to our counterparts at West Grey. But when they are building a police station, I'm wondering, instead of two separate units, to me, it would make sense to add an addition onto a police station. But again, I'm not a builder, but I'm glad, Kim's response that looking at other options, I think it's important. I had a tour of the Markdale Hospital just last week, and I was amazed at the size of the ambulance bay, which was only there for drop off, but it would easily accommodate one of the sites that we're looking at doing here. So I just think it's important that we reach out to different levels of government. And when they are building something, if there's any way we can accommodate ourselves into that, it's just one taxpayer. And Markdale was, I asked the question, why so big just for a drop off area? And they said, the architect thought it would look good. That was the response I got. Wasn't really the response I was looking for, but that's what I heard. You know, that's the way it would fit in. You know, this thing is, I don't know how high it is, but I don't think I was the only one that had the tour that was kind of taken back by the size of this drop off. So, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that space. I don't know if you've like seen where we go currently to Markdale. We have to back in off the road and it's out like beside the garbage can, you know, like it's difficult spot with blacking in blind. Like it's beautiful. And I really thank them for doing that. Like it's, I know it's big and obviously I don't know if it needs to be that big, but definitely that indoor taking a patient out inside is significantly different than taking them out in the cold winter days.
People often say for the, you know, the loss you had in the.
And to be clear, it does look good. No doubt about it. Any other questions? Councillor Deckard.
Thank you, Warden. Question more on the funding side. How many of these additions are based on growth, like the fact that we're, you know, bringing development into the county? And does our development charges, are they eligible for that expense? And secondly, are they being adjusted to reflect this additional cost? Just wondering how that works.
When ORH did the consultation work, they looked at growth. That was a big part of what they were doing, is where growth was going to be and help build that plan about, you know, where the bases should be and potentials where other bases could go. As far as development charges, Mary Lou might be better to answer that than I.
Take a crack at that one. So currently we do have some allocation of development charges for basically what was previously planned in our capital plans. Obviously, if this plan is supported by this council in principle, we would need to look at updating that in our next development charges update in order to reflect these potential new bases. Because no doubt, as Kevin indicated, there's definitely a growth related element to these bases. So we'd want to make sure that that's captured appropriately in the development charges as part of the next DC update.
Any other questions for Kevin on this report? Councillor Body.
Thank you, Warden Mellon. I think my pendulum seems to be swinging right these days. I remember a couple of years ago hearing at AMO that 9 cents out of every tax dollar collected is through property taxes. It's going to municipalities, yet we already hold 70% of the infrastructure. Last report was on housing. How are we going to solve that? We're already spending $24 million, whatever it is, on housing, and frankly are leading a lot of other similar municipalities on that. Here's another thing. It's great to hear that it's growth related in a sense, but here's another thing of another expense that we need. The right wing side of me wonders why somebody should be able to build a house in the middle of nowhere and expect to have the same ambulance service as, you know, time wise as the middle of a dense municipality. And that may sound like just don't sound sour grapes, but it's not. I think at some point we're going to need a new deal from the province and from the federal government. They can't keep dumping these costs onto us, and we can't keep adding costs around this table year after year after year without finding a new way of generating revenue. And yes, adding new tax assessment helps, but it's not going to keep us going forever. And I just don't know how maybe they've been saying this since 1867. I don't know how we're going to keep adding these extra costs that go on without on the tax base without a new deal from the province and the federal government. We can't just keep adding it on to taxes. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ian. Any other questions or comments? We'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mary Lou. It is almost 12:30. I'm going to suggest we break for lunch. Lunch is here. Yes, it is. So we'll break for lunch. If we can be back by 1, that's fine. Or 1:15. Well, let's say 1 o'clock. I think it's sandwiches today. Yes, it is. So sorry about your luck, Dane, that you're going to miss lunch, but that's okay. We'll save a piece of cake for you. Councillor DeBreen, did you have a question?
Thank you. That I may have to log off by about 20 to 2 for an event here in our local community. Hopefully, I won't have to miss anything.
Hopefully. Okay, good. Well, we'll recess until 1 o'clock. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Or shortly after 1, we'll bring the meeting back to order. I trust everyone enjoyed lunch. Sorry, Dane, the cookies were awesome. No wine, no, sorry. You have the wine, we got the cookies. We still think we got the better of the deal. Anyway, moving right along, we have Jen Moreau at the podium. She is going to speak to us about a report regarding council compensation review. So welcome, Jen, and the floor is yours. Sorry to interrupt, Jen. I need a mover and seconder first. Councillor Eccles, Councillor Mackey.
Good afternoon, Warden Milne and members of council. Before you, you have both a staff report from myself and you have a final review report from Gallagher and Associates. Jane Mazinski is our consultant that worked closely with us on this, and the final report is drafted by her. Unfortunately, she was unable to be with us today, so if there is anything quite technical to do with the report that you have a question about, we'll follow up with Jane after the fact. But I'm here to speak with it. Kim has words as well, perhaps, and Sandra Shipley, our HR manager, who deals with council compensation on a day-to-day basis as she supervises the payroll team, is also here in case there's questions that go beyond my knowledge base. So we conducted both a non-union and a council compensation review. It has been a number of years since we have done a council compensation review. The last formal review was done in 2013. We have adjusted annually for cost of living allowance since that point in time. And in 2018, there was a report before council that recommended increasing council pay to equal what it should be in 2019 without the 1/3 taxable allowance. So those are the points in time that council compensation has been looked at over the past 10 years. The review that Gallagher conducted and that you have in front of you discusses bringing council members to what we call P50, which is neither leading nor lagging. It's just reaching the middle of the comparators that we have selected that are like us, based like us. Council is quite similar. There is one, as Jane has pointed out in her final report, that was used as a comparator, but not for the results of the P50, and that is Huron County, because their compensation base is based primarily on per diems, whereas ours is not. You'll see in the final report that the warden's salary is not being recommended as being adjusted because of where it currently sits, but council members are being recommended to adjust to reach that P50. The amount is in the report in the financial analysis, and it is a recommendation for you to consider to put forward to the 2024 budget. It is not to be approved for today. And we'd also ask council to consider directing staff to come back with a formal policy and procedure on when we review council compensation. And we are hoping to align both the non-union and council cost of living adjustment. So hoping that council will recommend a future report to come probably in October that details how we maintain compensation for council. And with that, knowing that you've had the report to review, I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jen. Are there any questions? Councillor Gregg.
Well, I don't have a question. I think Jennifer's report's well laid out and says everything it needs to say. I will say that if we have a policy, and we do, and that's what we're trying to mirror here with the rates that we set. I would understand if I was staff, it would be very hard to include in the recommendation that the wage or salary for warden be decreased. But I think actually it should come down, because if the median is $75,607 and we want to truly live within that that 50th and that 5%, then I think the warden's salary should be probably $79,387.35 pennies, but I can be corrected to the small cents. So anyway, that's just where I'm at. I don't think it would discourage anyone from running for the position next year. And it's not a slight to the current warden. He's doing a wonderful job. I just think it actually then is better reflective of the policy that we have, that we are adopting as the rates for counselors. The one question I have for salary for counselors, when a counselor does not attend and there is an alternate counselor, does this policy allow for us the opportunity to examine in the future not paying a county counselor for not making a meeting? I've always had a problem with the taxpayer footing the bill twice when there's an alternate makes a council meeting. To me, I just think it makes sense that if you can't make a meeting, then the county counselor just has that salary reduced to reflect that. So I guess that's the one question that I have in there is that kind of flexibility within the current policy if we were to examine that in the future? Yeah, I'm not sure who to direct that question to.
I see Sam's behind you there, Jen. Maybe she'd like to have a run at that one.
It is actually the current policy that where a member of council is allowed to miss 3 meetings with no deduction. But when it comes to that 4th meeting, there's a deduction of a full day per diem.
Okay, so thanks for that. That said, I will move an amendment. I'll see if there's any support for it, that the salary for the warden also be set at the median plus the 5%, which is aligned with council. That number may not be exact 79,387, but that's just simply using 5% of the median calculation in the report.
I will just ask if there's a seconder for that motion. Seconded by McQueen, and with that, I'll declare pecuniary interest. Mr. McQueen, would you take the chair?
Okay, there, I do remember. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to provide a comment on how we would deal with a situation like this in the non-union compensation, because we do have a policy. If someone is paid over market, we do something called red circling. So a compensation does not get reduced, it gets held. And then future cost of living is not applied until the point that that wage reaches the P50 mark. So in the non-union realm, we would not decrease a salary. We would what's called red circle it. I just wanted to provide that feedback.
And a few years back, there was a policy or a report that came forward that raised the salary for the warden. That's somewhere in our archives. I can't remember that report, but there was a report that justified where it was at. And I'm trying to think, was that back in 16?
Since I was here, so yes.
Yeah, since 16. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Eccles, you have a question or comment?
And part of it was addressed with that. I won't be supporting this, but would say if we want to get it at that P50, then red circling is where we need to go. The one comment, the other comment, so Mr. Greg, you made was that it was 79,387. Maybe I've got a mistake, but I got it at 79,687. If that,
I don't have it in front of me, so I guess there could be clarity there. Councillor Greg?
And it was just quick math. I was using the median as calculated in the study, which is corresponding to the council median, and then adding the 5%. So that's the basis. I understand the comments on the red circling. However, we're always talking about municipalities and we're always using comparators. And if you don't correct something, you're still going to inflate across the board, because anybody that's using these numbers and the comparative analysis, then it's somewhat inflated. So that's why I'm saying, you know what, we should correct it and align it with exactly our policy. I get it over time, but it does inflate when you're always going out to other municipalities, and we talk about it around the lunch table. This is just responding to it.
So just to get that exact number, really, if the motion was to carry, it should be determined how that number is going to be captured. Go ahead.
In the report on page 6, Jane lists the median excluding Huron, which is what we've done with council members because of the difference in the remuneration formula that they use, as 79,687.
Is that okay with the number, Councillor Greg, then, for that number? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Body.
Thank you. Can you kind of estimate how many years it would take to get to where it is now anyway, if you redlined it? I know that I'm sandbagging you without giving you advance notice, but just kind of roughly, is 2 years?
I'm going to look over to my counterpart, who's the director of finance, and say if we were estimating a 2.5 increase for 2024, if she could calculate how much 2.5% on 79,687, where would that equal?
Go ahead, Mary Lou.
With a 2.5% increase, you would be above red circling in 2025. So in 2023, you're at 79,687. 2024 would be 81,679. And in 2025, it'd be 83,721.
Councillor Body, do you have a follow-up to that? No. Okay, any other questions, comments to the motion that's on the screen here, that's on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? That motion is lost. Mr. Warden, I wrote some numbers on your page here, so.
Okay, we're back to the, excuse me, we're back to the original motion as recommended. Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Eccles.
Thank you. As was stated, I'd like to put forward a motion that, yes, we red circle it, because if that's what we were, for non-union staff, that's what we do. So would we red circle the warden's salary at 82,255? That's my motion.
So we have a motion to amend the motion to red circle the warden's pay. Is there a seconder? Counselor Mackey. And with that, I will declare another pecuniary interest.
Okay, discussion on the motion on the floor. Counselor Body.
My question for Counselor Eccles is what the heck does that mean? Once we get there, then it will start to increase like everyone else. So just get you to clarify.
Okay, other discussions? Counselor Hutchison and then Counselor Eccles.
Thank you. So how often is this evaluated or assessed? Because if we're behind the eight ball for 5 years, how we're going to surpass that number?
The policy that we would hope to draft is that this would be reviewed once per term of council. Now, that being said, when we review council remuneration, it is likely a better target to review it in the final year of council so that you are putting forward any recommendation to the next term of council. So you are not increasing your own compensation. So that is what I would recommend, is that in the final year of this council, we look and do this again for council. That is the policy I would bring forward. And then we would do it in an every 4-year cycle in the final year of council.
Thank you for that. Any follow-up, Counselor Hutchison? No, okay, Counselor Eccles.
Thank you. And yes, that's the way, I think the way that the policy is for non-union staff is once it's increased, it's kind of then it's met that margin. And whatever increase would be going forward after it's met that margin. So basically what I'm saying is I would like our policy not to be a one-off, but to follow the non-union so that it's consistent across the board for non-unionized staff and council as well. Thank you.
Any follow-up to that, or yeah, go ahead.
So I believe what through you, what Councillor Eccles is saying is we would maintain that red circling until a cost of living increase would hit 82,255. And then from that point in the future, we would apply cost of living, whether that happens to be in 2025 or it happens to be at an earlier point. But that is exactly what we would do with the non-union counterpart.
Any follow-up, Counselor Eccles? No. Okay, any other questions, comments? Counselor Mackey.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. The cost of living increases, can you just explain how they are calculated each year? I mean, I think before you figured out 2.5, well, that's probably way under where the current rate of inflation is. I quickly figured out 3%, and that would be 2309. So which would take, if the warden was red circled now, next year, he would be effectively at that amount. So I agree. Let's get ourselves back to the policy. I don't expect it'll be very long before the warden's salary would start to increase by the inflationary rate. But I guess I'm looking at, does that get applied every year, the CPI to both counselors and to the warden's pay?
Go ahead.
Through you, Councillor McQueen, the COLA currently for council is based on the 12 months average CPI to the date ended July. That is how we apply council COLA, and council can either accept that or not. As in the past 2 years, council has reduced that amount from the actual CPI, as is your right. We will be proposing, if you allow, that we would align council and non-union COLA formula, and we will be bringing that forward. It's a little bit different than CPI. It'll just be a different formula that is not just CPI based, because CPI can be quite, it can quite fluctuate a bit. So we want to base it on our settled contracts, what our comparators are recommending for that year, and we would like a consistent non-union and council. COLA average. But for right now, it is to the 12-month average CPI ended in July of the previous year.
Any follow-up, Councillor Mackey? No. Okay, Sandra, do you have any comments? No? Oh, Madam Clerk.
I just wanted to confirm, Councillor Eccles, that the motion on the screen is your intention, if you could.
Are there, sorry. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
I would say it should say and not incorporate future cost of living adjustments until this rate is reached.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yeah, that'd be clarification.
Yeah.
That's what I was understanding. Assume the way it would be. Probably better.
Right. We want clarity on our motions. All right, any last comments? Everybody understands the motion? Any further comments from anyone? Okay, motion's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. All right, so I think we can call back the warden. Or maybe you want me to finish this. Okay, the motion, the main motion has been amended. What's those two motions? So I'm staying in the chair till we finish this. So go ahead, Councillor Greg.
Thanks, Deputy Warden. Just a question then to the main motion, Jennifer. When you talk about a policy for non-union staff and council, I'm just wanting to learn about the amount of flexibility that you would still contain in that policy for discussion, because obviously 5% of an $80,000 a year salary is much different than the gross dollar impact of $170,000 a year. And that $80,000 a year employee may have undergone more training under their own initiative or done certain things to elevate themselves to contribute to the corporation, but a fixed 5%, for lack of another term, it just increases that gap. So the 173 over the 80 gap then grows, and the higher wage didn't necessarily do anything more valuable to produce that. So I'm just wondering, what kind of flexibility does Human Resources calculate or consider in instances like that?
So Jen and Madam CEO.
Maybe I'll start just to ensure that I'm understanding you. So when we talk about coming back with a compensation and target pay policy, what we're looking for is your support to create the framework that allows us to build the budget. So that's how the numbers will be arrived at, that will be then put into the budget. Council will still always retain the ability to make adjustments based on the situation that we find ourselves in at budget time. So it's not that it's going to bind you. There are lots of different ways that people use to calculate cost of living adjustments and that. And so we're just wanting to pick one that seems to have broad applicability and bring that back to you, so you know where we're starting from. Is that what you want? Okay.
Okay, Jen, do you have anything else to add? No. And just as a sense of the warden, I think he's allowed to miss 12 meetings and then they get docked as well. Okay, so we have the amended motion that's on the floor. Any last comments? That's to the motion, the main motion. All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Don't see anybody opposed. That is carried. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden McQueen for that. So we have a closed meeting matter, and thank you, Jen, for your report. Closed meeting matters, the Committee of the Whole does now go into closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended to discuss advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose in litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals, more specifically Blue Meadows Plan of Subdivision. And the following staff remain: Kim Wingrove, Scott Taylor, Michael Eterno, Rob Hatton, Tara Warder, and Sarah Goldrup. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Eccles, seconded by Councillor Pringle. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Rob. We are now back in open session, and I can confirm that we only discussed in closed session that item which was listed for us to go into closed session. Other business, we have a notice of a special joint committee of the whole meeting on August 31st of this year. Take notice that Grey County Council will participate in a special joint committee of the whole meeting with the Council of the Municipality of West Grey on August 31st of this year, commencing electronically at 10 a.m. and live stream to the County of Grey YouTube channel to receive information regarding the development of Rockwood Terrace and early works tendering project updates, and that Grey County Council will then proceed into special council immediately following the special joint committee of the whole meeting. We just give notice, right? There's no, right. Okay, so that has been noted. Any notice of motion? Councillor McQueen.
Just other business? Do we have any update with our delegations at AMO in the sense of if we've been accepted, haven't been accepted? Because sometimes they don't tell you till like 2 days ahead of time, right? So.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Yes, we were able to secure each of the delegations that we asked for. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Body.
Just a quick question on the notice of the special meeting. Will we be able to attend by Zoom, Teams, etc.? We don't have to be in the room. Good, thanks.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's only electronically. There's no live. Yep. Yep. West Grey doesn't have a building big enough for us all to get into. Any other notice of motion? Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden. It's not a notice of motion. It was just for clarity with regard to the AMO delegations. Through you, do we have the time slots confirmed for those delegations at AMO, or is that still pending?
We do have all of the times. Have all of the times. I'm not 100% sure. I'll need to double check whether or not I have all of the rooms. There were a few places where they were trying to sort that out. But once we know we have all of that, I'll make sure that I'll share the package with everyone that has both the delegation materials as well as the times and the rooms. And then you all have it for your reference. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else? Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I guess just when we're talking about delegations, sometimes it's confusing as to how many of us should be at a delegation. I'm not sure if anyone has an answer about, maybe Kim, like how many do you like to see at a delegation? Don't want to be, overextending, our welcome, but at the same time, if it makes sense that 5 of us are there or 2 of us, just be nice to know in advance, because there's always things going on and, juggling things around. And if you need us there, then we want to be there, but just never really sure.
So by way of clarification, when we set up the delegations initially, some people we had asked, people to indicate their interest. So if you were one of the people that had said at the very outset, you wish to be included in a particular delegation, you should have that invitation in your calendar. But I think, in most cases, I think the most we have in any delegation of elected officials is 4, and then and there's a couple of them where there's only the warden and one other. So certainly other people would be welcome. I would say Kevin's not here anymore. One of the delegations that we have is with the Ministry of Labor, and it has to do with OSI, operational strain injury, PTSD, and the paramedics, and the need for a much more developed program to carry people through that situation. In that case, Gray took the lead in asking for the delegation, but I do have a number of people attending from the Ontario Association of Paramedic Chiefs. So there are a few people in that delegation outside of Grey County proper, and for the Ministry of the Attorney General, where we're talking about justices of the peace appointments, we did include the warden and the CAO from Bruce County because we share responsibility for the court. But again, I'll put all that out there, and I think if, there were a couple of extra people, if you want to, now that you've had time to think about it, if you want to join, I think it's fine. It's only really a worry about spending 10 of the 15 minutes doing introductions, but we can manage that.
Thank you, Kim. Oh, that's all right. Anyone else? I need one more motion to adjourn. Counselor McKay, Counselor McQueen. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Everyone, can I ask you this piece of paper that I left at your desk? The consultant, Ian, asked that we could just get that. So if you just write a word on it, I don't need your name or anything like that, but just put your value on there and I'll gather it up. For the folks that are on the phone, I'll email this out to you and you can add your information in as well. Okay, and send it back to Ian. Thank you. Thank you.
The Long-Term Care Redevelopment Task Force will convene here at 2:05.